Chapter 20, Never Turn Your Back. Even on your past. The attack of Yoshino's fire creature Gerda came quickly at Naruto as the blonde shinobi was ready to react in a hurry. It was a good thing that he did because on Yoshino's direction, Gerda's first move was to fire a jet of flames at Naruto, who quickly dodged and formed 5 Kage Bunshin to test the waters. Upon getting close enough to Gerda to strike, only one clone was able to lay a hand on Gerda as it landed a punch, however this only wound up with the clone burning itself and dispelling. The other attacking clones were then destroyed by a torrent of flame that came from the fiery figure. It stands to reason that you have powers of your own, especially if you've lived this long. Yoshino commented after seeing Naruto's Kage Bunshin technique, too bad it won't be enough. Gerda once again attacked headlong in an attempt to burn Naruto alive with a jet of flame directed right at him. Come on, who did I know or meet in the last 200 years that actually had powers and could do anything like this? Naruto thought to himself as he jumped into the air and dodged the fire by sticking to the side of the outside wall of the abandoned hospital. The anger she had in her eyes directed at him made him desperately want to know who this woman was supposed to be to him, but for now he was in a fight. If I can take out her fiery little friend, then I can think about who she is for as long as I want to. With that in mind, Naruto pulled out the hilt of the Raijin no Ken sword of the Thunder God and extended the glowing yellow blade with his chakra, prepared to cut through whatever he had to. Gerda rushed at Naruto and attempted a flaming punch that missed and wound up smashing a hole through the wall Naruto had just been standing on. This was a mistake that was not allowed to be rectified as Naruto cleaved straight through Gerda, bifurcating the fiery humanoid creature and letting it drop to the ground in a heap. He's so fast. Yoshino thought as she barely saw Naruto stop moving long enough to cut through Gerda before he disappeared from view again and reappeared 10 feet away from her. It hurts to be forgotten, Naruto, but as a Bount I'm actually pretty used to such a thing. Tell me how you know who I am. Naruto demanded with hard eyes. Your little fire thing isn't getting back up, so I want some answers here. What exactly did I do to you? Yoshino merely let out a bitter laugh in response. My dear doll, Gerda isn't that easy to defeat. You can't destroy him like that, he'll just regenerate. Almost as if it was in response to her very words, a large blast of fire erupted from behind Naruto and engulfed his entire body. The shocked look on his face was the last thing Yoshino managed to see from him before her doll covered him in flames. I really don't think you can do the same thing even if you have lived this long. Shinra Tensei, subjugation of the omnipresent god. With that call of the specialized ninjutsu, the flames were forced away with a massive burst of gravity that seemed to shove it aside, leaving Naruto standing there with his school clothes singed and partially burnt and light burn marks on his person. They were already healing though as he stared her down with his Rinnegan active and out. You'd be pretty surprised if you think I can't. He extended his sword hand towards Yoshino and made a "come hither" gesture with his index and middle fingers. Banzhou Tenin, heavenly attraction of all creation. Yoshino found her body suddenly pulled towards Naruto as the man cocked his free hand back to deliver a punch, but before she was pulled in far enough to take the hit, Gerda grabbed her and snatched her up out of Naruto's gravitational pull. Not willing to let them get off scot-free, Naruto jumped after them and wound up getting above them before delivering a hard kick to the back of Gerda, sending both the doll and the Bount crashing to the ground. Gerda turned so that he was able to cradle and protect Yoshino during the crash as his fire and magma body dragged a hot trench through the ground. Yoshino got herself up from Gerda's protection and glared at Naruto before he vanished from sight again. Gerda jumped back up and unleashed a rush of flames that went up in a ball that surrounded himself and Yoshino. Naruto stopped himself from trying to force his way through the ball lest he get himself burned again and slip into a trap. A grumble escaped Naruto's lips, and there's no water around here for me to use to put this bastard's flames out. He'd never pull enough immediate moisture from the atmosphere to create any jutsu strong enough to extinguish Gerda, and ripping up the ground to find a water pipe was out of the question even if he had the time to search for one. From the large defensive ball of fire, smaller, yet still very large, fireballs flew Naruto's way, forcing him to spring back out of the way of danger. A fireball that got too close to Naruto was kept away when Naruto took the Raijin no Ken and batted it away like a softball, sending it exploding into the side of the nearby abandoned hospital. The area of the battlefield was turning into something of a fire pit. It's time to show you how a master uses this thing, Naruto said, holding the Raijin no Ken out and moving his free hand underneath the bottom of the hilt, forcing another glowing yellow blade to extend, now giving twin blades on both ends of the hilt. Naruto began rotating the sword rapidly as lightning began to crackle off of the weapon and it became a spinning yellow blur. He held the spinning weapon above his head and thunder began to sound in the sky. Raiju, lightning beast. A bolt of lightning struck the weapon from the sky and reflected back up in a multiple branching pattern. From the sky, larger bolts of lightning started spontaneously hitting the ground along the battlefield. This forced Gerda to release his defensive fireball before it wound up being struck by lightning and assisted Yoshino in dodging the attacks while Naruto just held still and seemed to be directing the mostly wild lightning by spinning his sword above his head and keeping his powerful eyes locked onto Yoshino and Gerda. Yoshino separated from Gerda as Naruto's lightning eventually struck the doll of fire and began battering it mercilessly with electricity in an attempt to utterly destroy it. The force of the lightning jutsu eventually turned Gerda into rubble, at which point Naruto finally stopped spinning the Raijin no Ken and let his jutsu drop. There, regenerate that. Well, since you asked so nicely. Yoshino said as Gerda did just that right before Naruto's eyes, reforming as if Naruto had never pulverized the doll with repeated strokes of lightning from the sky. You walked away and you never even said goodbye. I thought you were better than that. She said bitterly, I thought you understood what it meant to not belong, and now that I know that you survived this long without aging a day, it makes me hate you even more. Hearing that from Yoshino got Naruto to grit his teeth angrily as he had been racking his brain trying to figure out how she knew him. I never even hung around anyone long enough for them to remember anything about me. The last time I ever even stopped anywhere long enough for any person to be friends with me was in Germany. His eyes then widened at the spark of memory that ripped through his head. No, I do know you. He didn't know what else to say other than that. When he knew Yoshino, she definitely didn't have powers, at least none that he could sense. She was just a lonely woman that he met in a Prussian village that somehow got attached to him during the repeated wars around the German area in the mid-1700s. He wound up leaving in a failed attempt to try and prevent the 7 Years' War from beginning and stayed busy in subsequent attempts to end it, which had also failed. Ensuing attempts to do so wound up blacklisting him from basically all of Europe as an urban legend and criminal, forcing him to leave for Far East Asia, Japan in particular, until the 1850s. It took you long enough, didn't it? Yoshino said tauntingly with her hands on her hips. I waited for you to come back, but you never did. I waited so long that the people around me clearly aged while I stayed the same, and they chased me away as if I were a monster. I wanted to die myself as much as they wanted me dead. You were the only person I felt comfortable with, that I felt truly understood me, until him. She finished hatefully, with more spite than she had already been speaking to Naruto with. How was I supposed to know you had powers and you were immortal? Naruto defended verbally, his desire to fight having faded away once he realized that she had been a friend. You never said anything. You never talked about yourself when you were anywhere near me, ever. And I couldn't just stay either. Not only were there too many things happening all over Europe and the entire world at the time, if he had stayed for any reason as long as Yoshino apparently had, then the same suspicions that had been thrust onto her would have been cast upon him as well. He had been alive for more than long enough by that point to know that normal people didn't take decades of youthful appearance passively, so even if he wanted to stay in one place he wouldn't be able to. Besides, he hated overusing hench for that reason. He liked the way he looked. I didn't know that you had powers and that you were immortal. I just thought you were a traveling mercenary. Yoshino fired back. If I had known that, and even if I had shown you, you probably would have just tried to kill me like the others, thinking I was a monster just like them. She abruptly shut up, however, when she felt a rise of rather angry power from Naruto as he started radiating black chakra off of his person. You're going to stand there and compare me to some idiots that would just attack a person because they found out they were different? Naruto asked, biting back his voice from raising any higher, though it was quite clear that he was angry. In his anger, Naruto punched the ground with a massive yell, forcing the ground to rock harshly from the magnitude. Following the punch, cracks from the ground branched off from his point of impact and shook into the decrepit old hospital nearby, bringing the entire front wall of the abandoned facility shaking and crumbling down. If we were really close, then you would have known that I would never attack first and ask questions later. Especially a friend. Just the idea of anyone comparing Naruto to any sort of witch-burning bigots that he had seen countless numbers of in his time in existence made him greatly upset. He had become desensitized to most of the violence that seemed to surround his endeavors, but that always seemed to be his pet peeve, going right up there with people questioning his personality and taking his normally bright persona as a sign of ignorance towards the way the world was. It was even worse coming from someone that knew him. The chakra radiating off of Naruto was intense and full of malintent, so much so that Yoshino began backing away from him. This is Naruto's power? Where was this back when I knew him? I could never sense anything from him at all back then. The almost invisible silhouette of mammoth black tails seemed to flicker around Naruto's body like ghosts to a normal person in Yoshino's eyes. I don't know enough about him to fight him here. She looked around for an opening to escape and beat a temporary retreat until she could at least figure out what she was possibly dealing with from Naruto. Meanwhile, with Naruto himself, he knew that there was something wrong. Not only did he seem to get far angrier than he otherwise would have in response to what Yoshino said about him, he most certainly did not consciously trigger pulling up any special chakra from the creature sitting deep within him. He had to take time to collect himself and calm down with deep breaths in order to rein himself in. I've only really lost myself like that when it looks like the Jubi is about to wake up. Naruto thought to himself through his loud breaths, taken to keep himself calm. This is not good. It hasn't even been long since the last time I fought it. How could it be waking up so soon? He figured that he had several hundred more years before he had to even worry about preparing himself again, but he was certain that he wasn't mistaken in what he was feeling. Naruto. Naruto turned around and saw Yuruchi appear before him with a look of worry on her face. Feeling that he was even-tempered once more, Naruto walked over to the feline-themed woman, Yuruchi-chan. You found me. He looked around and clicked his teeth in disappointment. His little episode scared off Yoshino and gave her time to actually escape. He simply couldn't feel her energy signature without being in Sage mode or in his Jinchuriki state, and even then it was faint. A frown came over her face. You were pouring out a terrible energy from your body. I'd be surprised if any spiritually aware being in Karakura town didn't feel it. I was just the first one here. She looked around at the fiery battlefield and the mostly demolished hospital building. Are you all right? She asked, taking note of his singed and burned clothes, though by now his minor wounds had long since healed. I'm fine. Naruto assured her. How was he supposed to explain anything that had just occurred though? It wasn't exactly something he was eager to share. Oh hey, you know the soul-sucking going on around Karakura town? I know the woman doing it. I let her escape too, but don't worry, it was only because the world-ending monster stuck inside me almost woke up and threw a temper tantrum. When it rains it pours, he guessed. I got into a fight with a Bount, at least that's what she said they were called. Yuruchi let out a short grunt and crossed her arms over her chest. Kasuke was right then, damn it. She shook her head and looked towards the damaged area that was still burning. We should go. With that, both Naruto and Yuruchi disappeared swiftly to return to the base. XXX. Gerda had been sealed back into object form as Yoshino ran further away from the site of her fight with Naruto. I barely even marked him and he didn't even seem to be trying until the end. All of that power was just, ugh, I would have had to fuse to even hope to have a chance against it. She thought as she jumped over a fence and kept running away. The retreat continued until a male voice managed to get her to stop cold in her tracks. You know he doesn't like it when you run away like this, Yoshino. You're very special to him. You're special to all of us. Stopping in place, Yoshino turned around to face the figure standing directly behind her. A young-looking man with blue eyes and short brown hair with a small amount of facial hair on his chin stood there calmly. He wore a white button-up shirt and a green vest and tie with black dress pants and shoes along with a black fedora atop his head. He had a smirk on his face and a devious look in his eyes. Damn it. It would have been him, wouldn't it? Yoshino thought to herself as there was no running away now, not with the Bounce bloodhound nipping at her heels. What are you doing here, Kane? I just told you. Kane said, seemingly taking the whole thing as a game. He doesn't like it when you run away, Yoshino. Now personally, I don't care because it gives me something to do other than hunt for food. I didn't even take any souls tonight just so I could look for you. He said with a rather wide grin. If you want to run, that'd be fine because I think the chase would be fun, and if you want to skip the attempt to escape and just fight, that would be even better for me. Brat. Yoshino growled out as she actually did ponder summoning Gerda again to try and take Kane down a peg, but she was fully aware of the fact that he was held up on a pedestal of sorts. He had broken himself repeatedly for the last century or so to achieve his power and skill faster than basically any other, and said power was the peak of combat skill for a Bount. There wasn't any doubt that without proper motivation Yoshino would be defeated by Kane cleanly enough for him to simply return her, thus she gave in and merely walked towards him, still glaring at him though as she passed him in order to return home where the others were waiting. Ah! Kane said, hands in his pockets as he followed behind her. I thought you were going to be more fun than that, Yoshino. I'm disappointed. The woman merely remained silent as they continued back to their own area of operations. However, Kane looked up at the sky where he could see the smoke and debris from Yoshino's fight with Naruto still floating up. That power I felt, it's just like back then. I can't wait to show you that my strength is more amazing than yours. You won't ever make me look so weak ever again. XXX. Hours later, Naruto's base. You knew about? Urahara asked incredulously as he sat in the dining area of the base along with Yoruichi, Haiden, Gaara, and the Mod Souls. Well, that makes sense, I guess, even if the chances of running into one would be slim at best. I didn't know she was about 250 years ago. Genius. Naruto muttered, picking at his dinner with his chopsticks. He wasn't in the mood to eat and he had barely lost any chakra to need to eat to replenish any strength. I didn't even know what about was. I couldn't readily see full ghosts either, remember? She never used any special abilities and I didn't even want her as a friend at first. He wanted the explanation to end because in addition to the pressing bound issue he also had to check with a more personal matter at his first opportunity. Wait. Yoruichi cut in, I thought you said you hadn't tried actively befriending anyone in 1,000 years. Naruto shrugged in response, I didn't try to be friends with her. For some reason she tried getting closer to me. I met her in a Prussian village. She was a lonely woman in a small village and most able-bodied men were serving in the standing army at the time, and I guess I was the only person that was really around her age that was there. Apparently she was more right than she knew. Flashback, Prussia, 1755. Naruto thought that he really needed to stop getting sage coats tailored for himself, or at least he needed to stop wearing them so much. The fabric and eye-catching nature of the piece of his favored clothing made people think he was rich. Now he was rich, but that didn't really matter. Even as he walked through the village that he had decided to take residence just outside of in the woods, he could hear people commenting on him. He couldn't really fault them, there wasn't much in these small places to do other than to work or gossip, so he let it slide. On the other hand, it looked like war was about to begin again. The enemies of this country had built their strength back up from past defeats and were ready to attempt another prolonged conflict. Since he had begun his wandering, things had gotten harder and harder. Keeping the peace from the background seemed impossible. Hell, keeping the peace period seemed impossible. But he had to try though, which was why he had come to Prussia in the first place. As he entered and walked through the forest that kept his self-constructed home concealed, Naruto decided to sit down under a tree so that he could take a break. I really wish things were like they were back when I first started wandering, at least then the world was smaller and my name held some damn weight, not like now. I can't even get a private conversation with any kings or anything because I'm a nobody, and I can't get close without getting an audience without being called an assassin. He had discovered around 500 years prior that nothing he did to avert war worked. Early attempts at trying to pass on teachings the way the original Rikudo Sannin did only wound up with his teachings being used to propagate even more war, and trying to show his own power and force never ended well at all. All he could do was attempt to shorten conflicts and protect innocents, but even that was getting harder and harder. People fight like crap these days. Naruto thought as he let his mind wander when he considered how Europeans engaged in open warfare. Of course the way he fought would have had people accuse him of being a savage, but he'd rather be a live savage than a dead gentleman. He didn't even use guns, but then again Raisin Shuriken beats gun, it also beat cannon, and warship. Hell, Raisin Shuriken beat everything these days. Maybe I should just disappear on a mountain somewhere to just get away from all of this? As Naruto shut his eyes to attempt to meditate for a bit to pass the time, he thought of just becoming a hermit. Nah, I'd go crazy from boredom. Besides, it would only last for maybe 100 years before someone found me. His meditation quickly picked up on the presence of someone nearby, close enough to see what he was doing. In case it was someone wishing to do him harm for some reason, he opened his eyes and called them out, "Come out so I can see you. If you're going to watch me, I want to see you too." It took a second or so, but from behind a tree nearby a woman walked out. She wore a long light-colored dress and shroud on her head, covering her long brown hair. Her face didn't have much life to it, so she wasn't there to fight him. It didn't seem she was there for much of anything, as her brown eyes looked at him with a dull interest while he stared right back with a placid expression. The two just stared at each other for the longest time without saying a word, Naruto trying to decipher what it was the woman was looking for by observing him. He had seen her around the town whenever he came around because he could remember never seeing her around anyone else. Didn't she have any family or friends? You're like me. Naruto blinked in confusion as he heard the woman finally speak up. Apparently she realized what she had done and blushed, not meaning to say that out loud as she averted her eyes away from his. "What do you mean I'm like you?" Naruto asked. "I really doubt that you're anything like me." Getting her nerve back quickly in the face of the strange blonde man whom no one knew his name, the woman voiced her reasoning. "Well, whenever you come into town you never speak to anyone. You've been here for over a year and it's rather strange." "So now I'm strange?" Naruto said with a smirk. Maybe if he could get this woman to think she had offended him she would leave him alone? What exactly would occur if he became friends with her? Nothing positive in the long run that was for certain proven in the past. Yes. Well, that plan certainly backfired most spectacularly. Offending him apparently wasn't a big concern to her, something else that was different about this woman, but I think in a good way. "You're not like anyone else, but you don't seem dangerous, you honestly seem kind of lonely." Naruto raised an eyebrow, getting her to explain further. "That's what I meant by saying that you're like me. But you're beautiful." Naruto blurted out before thinking things through. Seeing the surprise on the woman's face he backtracked a bit with a sheepish grin. "I mean, why would anyone like you be lonely? You seem more than nice enough." A grateful smile came onto the woman's face. "I'm kind of different from other people. Please don't make me tell you why. I don't think you would even believe me if I told you." Chuckling at someone thinking they could show him something that he had never seen before, Naruto decided to respond. "Don't be so sure. I've seen pretty much everything you could see in my lifetime. I don't think you could surprise me with much." "Yes. I assume a mercenary such as yourself has seen quite a bit," the woman said with a patronizing smile before taking a moment to think. "You are a mercenary, aren't you? You don't seem to be from around here, you don't even seem to be from this country. In addition to that you dress strangely and you've been seen carrying weapons before, no firearms though. Strange." "Close enough I guess," Naruto said with a deadpan look on his face, "and I don't like rifles or anything like that. It's just the way I am." A nervous look overcame the face of Naruto's new female acquaintance as she made to ask another question. "I rather enjoy walking through the forest in my spare time, but it's clear that you live here. I would hate to trouble you in case my presence here ever caused me to stumble upon your home. You seem to like your privacy, mister. You can call me Naruto." He didn't know why she was nervous, whether she was afraid of him or otherwise, but he wasn't a jerk enough to tell her that she couldn't walk around on land that he didn't even own. Especially since his house was more or less a hut with barely enough room for him to eat and sleep in. "And sure thing. You can come here whenever you want to. Just be careful wandering around. There are some pretty scary things someone could run into out here." That didn't sound creepy or suspicious at all, did it? From her reaction she didn't seem to care too much. "I'm sure," the woman said, letting out a slight laugh. "By the way, my name is Dashed." End flashback. "Yoshino," Naruto said as he brought his thought process to an end. "Her name is Yoshino," he said in a reserved manner as he thought more along the time span where he actually knew the woman. "I was only there for 3 years though. I guess I left an impression." Naruto said the last thing dryly, but there wasn't really anything humorous about the current situation. "Maybe she liked me too much to try and suck out my soul." Urahara chimed in again. "Bounce don't really go for taking souls from living humans, at least not until now. I haven't heard of so many cases happening at once before. They usually take the souls of dead humans that are trying to pass on, but this gives the Bounce immortality." Hayden had enough of the loose description since he had been hearing them all night thus far. "Okay, enough of all of this mystery attacker shit. What the fuck is a Bound? Why the fuck do I care, and how the fuck do you kill it? Please let it be with sharp objects and lots of physical violence and blood." The mod souls in attendance all let out a shiver as Hayden grinned following his last statement. However, everyone else had more than adjusted for Hayden's own personal brand of lunacy and thus resulted in being unfazed by his words as Urahara carried on. "Bounce are living beings much like Quincy's, are only they were artificially created centuries ago in an explosion by a Shinigami scientist. Well out of embarrassment for what happened in creating them by mistake, the fact that they posed a threat to the balance of the worlds because of their consumption of souls, and because the explosion took out 1/10 of the Siriidii, the Bounce were meant to be destroyed by Auror of the Central 46. A few must have survived then." Gaara's stoic face was clearly not pleased by what he was hearing. "I heard that the Shinigami did the same thing to the Quincy race as well. The more I hear, the less I like about this Central 46. These were more or less genocides, simply because it wasn't convenient to allow the races to keep existing. There is always a way to resolve such issues without exterminating one side or the other, a non-violent method. I agree. Hayden said with a sage-like nod, surprising everyone in the room, except replace the word non with extremely, and after the word violent, you should include the word blood explosion extraordinaire. He said before cackling loudly in his normal maniacal manner. Yeah, that was more like it. And we're back. Yoruichi said in a deadpan voice, getting things on track once more, but yes, a lot of us aren't blind to the tons of imperfections that exist in the Seriidii. Still, it's the Spirit King who is in the real control, the only person that the Central 46 answers to, and no one has ever gone to see him and come back. Only members of Squad Zero, and they stay there in the realm of the Spirit King for the rest of their existence. Hearing about Soul Society politics, especially ones of this nature, was beginning to grate on Naruto's nerves, and made him glad that he was something of an anarchist at this point in time. Yoshino had this weird fire thing fighting for her that seemed sentient. She called it a doll, and it seemed to be the thing that embodied most of her combat powers, so I guess all bounts have something like that too. Urahara nodded in reply, and these mod soul guys are going to help us find them? That's right. Urahara said brightly, feel free to throw in a bonus for my services once this is all said and done. I'll definitely feel free to not do that. Naruto said, getting a disappointed groan out of the blonde scientist before focusing on the task at hand. This is good though. Maybe now that we can actually readily detect the presence of bounts, we can have some warning when it's time to fight next time, and I don't have to get hypnotized. Hayden found that last bit of information hilarious. You got caught in a glorified genjutsu? Huh. You're a sucker for illusions? That's just outstanding. The jab from Hayden, who wasn't much better with illusions and mostly survived them during his ninja career due to the fact that nothing could kill him in battle and he could just injure himself heavily enough to break any genjutsu, didn't get Naruto to rise and engage in a battle of words, much to everyone's surprise. It couldn't have just been the bout thing working his nerves, Yoruichi figured. Fighting an army of Shinigami in the middle of their stronghold didn't give him much pause, nor did heading feet first into the realm full of hollows on a whim, and the key to reading Naruto's mindset was through his eyes when it wasn't evident by his words. In that case his eyes were seemingly full of thoughts of a negative nature. XXX. Vizard's hideout, training ground. I am so sick of fighting you. Ichigo yelled at Hiyori with his hollow mask on his face as they clashed blades, back off you pygmy. Or at least let somebody else fight me for once, I'm getting bored here. The small pigtailed warrior took offense to the fact that she was apparently boring Ichigo, even if he had a point since he had acclimated very well to taking the full measure of her attack, as much as she was allowed to utilize anyway against an ally, which was still quite a massive amount of power. Well, I'm the only one that feels like fighting your lame ass to get you to manifest your mask better, so shut up or get cut. As they continued to fight and the others remained as they were, just hanging out around the training area doing next to nothing, Naruto literally dropped in through the entrance at the top without a sound as his feet hit the ground. He walked forward until he ran into the barrier with his face and pressed it against it. Yo, someone drop this thing so I can get in. Fish cake. Mashiro said happily as she walked over to him from the inside of the barrier. You got in. But how did you get through the barrier outside? Hachi put up one out there and 3 down here. Well, I broke the one outside for kicks, and because I thought it might piss a few of you off. And I'm guessing that I just walked into the 3 others since I can't go forward anymore. He said, getting a nod from the green-haired ditzy woman in return. Cool, now could Hachi drop these 3? I've got some business. A nod came from the rather large man as he did what was requested of him. The appearance of Naruto and the lowering of the barriers gained the attention of the rest of the Vizards and the combating Ichigo and Hiyori, the latter of whom was rather perturbed at the interruption. Huh? What do you want here, dumbass? Do you want a beatdown too? You haven't given me a beatdown in days. Ichigo yelled heatedly, throwing his mask to the ground, getting upset at her belittling of his strides with his abilities. Ignoring both of them, Naruto marched right up to Ichigo and stared him down closely enough to unnerve Ichigo at the proximity. Can I help you? Naruto continued to appraise Ichigo without saying a word before putting a glowing black hand on Ichigo's forehead. Another moment passed before Naruto gave a thumbs up to Hiyori. Yeah, this is great. Wonder Boy is ready to rock and roll. Good work, you guys. Shinji stepped forward. You can't just yank him out of here, Naruto. We weren't done with him yet. Hiyori hasn't gotten a chance to vent on anyone like this in decades. I mean, his training isn't done yet. He can only keep his mask on for over a minute. That was his limit. Truthfully, only more fighting and hands-on experience at this point would tack on any more time to Ichigo's mask time until it became instinct for him to keep it on, but Hiyori hadn't had a good punching bag since they first wound up in the world of the living, and Ichigo was like Teflon. No matter what, the effects of a beating just never stuck to him. A deadpan look came at the de facto leader of the fallen Shinigami from Naruto before he looked back at Ichigo with the exact same expression, Wonder Boy. Yep. Ichigo responded quickly with a blank look on his face, used to Naruto's nickname for him by now. Feeling good? You know it. No more hollow takeovers? Nope. Let's roll then. Awesome. And with that, Naruto and Ichigo simply strode on out of the warehouse with apparently no strings attached. The others were stunned at how Naruto just walked in and walked out with Ichigo in tow like they were glorified babysitters. Did Ichigo even work for Naruto? Wait. Does Naruto pay for this kind of stuff? Kensei asked, vaguely remembering Naruto talking about some kind of job opportunity in the past, because we need money. To hell with money. Hiyori yelled, seething at what had just happened. That dandelion-headed bastard just took my punching bag. I'm going to kick his ass the next time he shows his face in here. At that point Naruto's head popped back into the room upside down from the real warehouse section above ground back into the training room. I'll give him back on one condition. You guys help me with this stuff that's going on right now. Then you can keep trying to kick the crap out of Ichigo. Is it Aizen? Lisa asked, curious as to what would be the reason. No. But I'm just thinking a full court press could nip some trouble in the bud right now. Naruto answered honestly, come on, you could have him back until I need him again for just one mission for me. All of you don't even need to leave to help. A unanimous answer went up from the entirety of the group, not interested. Before Naruto could open his mouth to try and barter out another service deal from the very difficult to deal with Vizards, Ichigo grabbed him by the roof of the mouth and pulled him back up through the opening. Would you quit trying to pimp me out for favors when you're not even paying me? You're almost as bad as Urahara. And who are we supposed to be fighting again? Triple X. Bount Mansion. So you're saying that's what you felt, aren't you? A tall, powerful-looking man with white hair, red eyes, and long eyebrows asked as he sat down in an ornate-looking chair. He had a vertical scar on his chin and wore a brown and dark blue trench coat over suit-like clothing, our old friend Uzumaki Naruto. At his side was a man with short black hair wearing a sleeveless Shinigami uniform, taking up the position of a bodyguard of sorts. Kane nodded with a smirk on his face as he took his fedora off, just as strong as ever, but I've got a question for you, Korea. If you knew who he was even all those years ago, then why didn't you try to kill him to get him out of the way? The white-haired man Korea's face exuded calm confidence and a distinct lack of offense at the question. When I first learned of him, he was a means to an end to secure something I wanted and we needed. I didn't expect him to survive, but he did because I was unaware of his powers at the time, and I never imagined that his lifespan was just as long as ours. I simply didn't see him as a threat. He then noticed Kane's eyes narrow at the prospect of Naruto not being a threat. You still despise him, don't you? Kane didn't answer, he simply turned to leave the room. Back then I was too weak to manage my own power, it was great enough to destroy me. But he handled it as if it were nothing. My own power that even I didn't have control over. Well, it's time to see how my strength truly compares to his now that me and my doll are in sync. Triple X. The next day, Naruto's base. With pretty much the entire group of combat-ready Karakura High School students assembled at long last now that Ichigo had been finally sprung from his never-ending sparring match against Hiyori, briefing was finally able to be fully given on the current situation. After hearing about the bounce and how they were going around attacking people, Ichigo was itching to test out his new power on an opponent, thus the entire situation with the bounce couldn't have occurred at a more opportunistic time for him. The only ones actually feeling left out were Yuryu due to his lack of powers and Tatsuki, because Naruto still had her training. How much power does it take to pop this damn rubber ball? I'm pumping out all of the chakra I can. Tatsuki growled as she was visibly straining her chakra into the small rubber ball in her right hand. Naruto had better be glad he was on the roof, not to be disturbed without a reason, or else he would have been getting an earful from his hot-headed student. As she did this and decided to keep an ear in on the meeting, Urahara held up 3 pieces of round candy. These are the mod souls that are able to detect bounce. You should put them in something a little less conspicuous so that you can keep them close at all times, even at school, just in case. He handed one to Ichigo, seeing as he believed out of the lot of the younger ones he would be the quickest one to find a fight if it was to occur. Here you go. This one is Ririn. Another one was handed to Chad. You get Noba. And the last one was given to Orihime, you've got Kuruto. Ichigo was quick to realize that it was just like the candy that housed Kan's soul, so that was easy enough to find a body for. All he needed was another doll or a stuffed animal or something. What about everyone else? Why don't they get one? Urahara grinned before answering Ichigo's question, because Naruto can actually sense them like the mod souls and find their location if he's in his sage mode, so he's basically his own bound detector. Yuruchi is meant to sit here on the base to wait for something. Gaara will be with you all anyway during school or with Naruto here, so he doesn't need one, because even if Haiden gets sneak attacked, well, we don't care because it's not like he can die in his Jigai even if they get him with a good attack, and because Yuryu doesn't have powers, so if he fought a bound he'd just be delivering himself on a silver platter to them, literally, because they would probably just eat his soul. Attention was not paid to the rain cloud forming over the silent Yuryu's head at Urahara's blunt statement that he was more or less useless. Chad held up the small piece of candy that held Noba's spirit. Got it, he said plainly as he headed out to find a plush toy or something to use for Noba's container. The next to leave was Orihime to do the same, right? If anything strange happens I'll call as quickly as I can. This left Ichigo and Yuryu alone with Urahara and Tatsuki. Ichigo blinked and looked at the little ball of candy that had been given to him before shrugging. Alright, I'm heading out too, I guess. Yuryu? Tatsuki? Either of you guys want to come with me? Honestly, Ichigo was just glad to be out of that damned warehouse after so long being stuck in there. He was absolutely loving life at the moment, and the offer to go do anything at all with Yuryu was evidence enough of that. I would rather not, Kurosaki. Yuryu replied coolly. It wasn't that he didn't want to go searching for bounts, it was just that Urahara was right. In the instance he found a bount, then what would he do? Ichigo was better off on his own, as much as he hated to admit it. He would be an albatross if he were to tag along. Damn that Shinigami Kuratsuchi Mayuri. I lost my powers trying to kill him and he didn't even have the courtesy to die. Looking over to Tatsuki at that point, Ichigo didn't get a much better answer from her as she proceeded to address him in cavewoman form. Need to pop stupid-ass rubber ball and learn cool jutsu that grinds through stuff. Go find and kill bounce. Tatsuki managed to grit out through her focus. Wow. Ichigo thought with a sweat drop, I didn't really expect the cold shoulder from both of them. Ishida maybe, but from Tatsuki too? She must really want to learn that attack. Ichigo scratched the back of his head before shoving his hands into his pockets and walking off. Alright, fine. I'll see you guys later then. XXX. On the roof of the base, Gaara and Haiden took note of Ichigo, Orihime, and Chad walking off on their own separate ways. In the case of the next bounce sighting they would be ready to move out, but for now they had another issue that they were being briefed on. You think the Jubi is stirring? Gaara said in his normal calm-sounding tone, but if one knew him well enough they could hear the shock in the redhead's voice. That is, very discomforting. For you maybe. Haiden said nonchalantly, the Jubi can be as scary as it wants to be, it can't kill me motherfuckers. Or did you both forget that part? True. Gaara admitted freely, but it could devour you and you could suffer for an eternity in its bowels, being digested until the end of time or until your Jigai actually does die from a lack of nourishment. That would also drain all of your Ryatsu, which means that your soul would die as well and your soul would be recycled. Thus when you were reincarnated you would not have your curse powers or any sort of memory at all, if mankind would even exist by the time you were reincarnated. That little revelation gave Haiden pause, because he had not thought that far ahead. Damn Gaara and his Kazekage smart train of thought to burst his immortality bubble. I didn't think of that as a possibility. Damn, that would be like getting stuck in the lazy-ass kid's forest buried alive, only worse, or purgatory. The silver-haired sadist turned towards Naruto, who hadn't spoken a word since he and Gaara had been given the news straight from the horse's mouth about what was happening. So how long do we have? Naruto's eyes remained closed as he attempted to keep up his meditation in addition to speaking to his friends. Honestly, I have no idea. It could just be a flare-up and I still have hundreds of years left, but do you really think we're that lucky? When it rains for us it pours, ever since the day we were born. Gaara said, speaking from experience for both himself and Naruto, simultaneously answering Naruto's rhetorical question at the same time. So this has never happened before? Not this soon after I had already beaten him. Naruto set a frown on his face as he continued to meditate. Once every 1,000 years, give or take a few centuries. I've fought him 3 times, and that's 2 times too many as far as I'm concerned. The first time happened in Italy a few hundred years after the war ended, and I didn't know what the little spurts of anger and difficulty suppressing my chakra meant, so I got totally blindsided when Sasuke decided to wake up the first time, and he was pissed. Noschit. Haiden chimed in unceremoniously. Unfettered by the interruption, Naruto continued where Haiden had stopped him from. We tore the entire landscape apart for 4 days straight. Earthquakes, nasty lightning storms, the works. Nobody in the area besides me walked away by the time it was all over, and people that explored the place afterwards said that a volcano, Vesuvius, did it. The volcano didn't do it, we did it. I did it. Despite her lack of inclusion in the council of the former shinobi, Yuruchi was hidden nearby in her cat transformation to help subdue her energy output in order to lessen the chance of her presence being discovered by her comrades during their private conversation. Needless to say, she was hearing the whole thing. Volcano. Yuruchi thought before the event linked up with the place and the cause. Oh no, Naruto. Shinigami were well aware of the events of Mt. Vesuvius due to the massive influx of thousands of souls following the disaster that had gone largely unexplained. The absurd amount of traffic that the Soul Society received immediately afterwards kept them from ever trying to search for why it had occurred in the first place. By the time things had calmed down, there was no sign of the cause of the tens of thousands of deaths. Don't tell me that was you. What about the second time it occurred? Gaara inquired curiously. You said you fought him 3 times. He told me he only fought the monster in him twice. Yuruchi thought to herself, why did he lie? The second time was 1,000 years later, and I knew it was coming from the feeling I was having, so I was able to get to the Sahara Desert where there was less of a chance of someone getting hurt. A wry smile came upon Naruto's face at that point that held little humor. It was a very good idea, because that time my mind was clear enough to actually fight him. It was so easy that time that I don't even consider that one of the times we fought. It only took a day to put that bastard back to sleep that time. Jubi or not, it had Sasuke's mindset, and he was overconfident from the first fight because he almost won. He didn't fight with any urgency. Sucker. Haiden gave Naruto a thumbs down and a raspberry. No random innocent bystanders dead? Thumbs down, Uzumaki brat. Jashin-sama would not have approved. He let out a sigh and shook his head. Just like movies, I guess. The sequel is never as good as the original. Naruto's eyes opened, revealing that he was in sage mode and was able to keep gathering nature chakra even while conversing. I think a few people died, but only around a dozen or so because they ventured close enough to try and get a look. The third time I ran up to the Arctic Circle around the 1800s, and we tore it all up. That was the worst one because he was pissed, he was aware, and he fought like he had nothing to lose because he didn't. I still don't know how I won that one. I was hurt so bad after it was over that I couldn't get back to civilization. I had to make an emergency hideout to stash all of my equipment that I brought for the fight just so that I had somewhere sort of safe to heal. Something caught Gaara's attention though. Naruto, you have the Rinnegan, correct? Naruto gave an affirmative grunt. So if you have the powers of the Rikudo Sannin, why do you not just reseal the Jubi in the moon, or something like the moon, since you have the same jutsu that created it in your repertoire? A deadpan stare came from Naruto. You don't think that I didn't think of that in over 2,000 years of being stuck with the bastard in my gut? All that would do would seal Sasuke's Jubi body away, and then I'd just end up making the 9 Biju all over again, free to roam I might add, with no one else able to seal them away because I'd be dead. So instead of one ultimate monster of destruction that can't die, there would be 9 weaker versions, that can't die. Versions that no one else in the world of the living would be able to deal with, since no one knows anything of how to make Jinchuriki to contain them. Haiden let out a scoff at Naruto. You're just afraid to die, aren't you? Gaara turned to Haiden, seemingly taking more offense at the slight than Naruto did, as the blonde expressed no interest in what Haiden was saying. Take that back, Haiden. Gaara warned him, the cork on the top of his gourd popping off as sand drifted out. To hear anyone doubt his best friend's sense of valor deeply irked him. He seemed prepared to fight when he realized that Naruto hadn't risen to the insult. Naruto? Naruto simply let his Rinnegan come into view as he made eye contact with Haiden. If you think I'm afraid to die, then you're as dumb as I look. Say I do it. Say that I pull it off and create the 9 Biju all over again. Then what? Yeah, it'll kill me, but that's not the point. The point is, who's going to clean up the mess afterwards? There is no next generation to solve the problem. No one in the world of the living can do it, and neither can anyone in the Siriidii if they even felt like stepping in. I wouldn't be surprised if they somehow found a way to make the Biju into their own weapon if I was vindictive enough to release them in the Soul Society. Hayden realized that he had subtly struck a nerve, and didn't feel like getting sealed away again. Naruto would be meaner about it and more thorough than Shikamaru was because he wasn't as lazy. He would make a moon and chuck him away into space never to be seen again if he were really upset. Okay, well, what about Hueco Mundo? We can do it right now, let's roll. A large hand of sand then slapped Hayden across the back of the head. Oi. Not an option either. Gaara said, calling his sand back and crossing his arms over his chest. It was said that when a Jinchuriki died and the seal holding the demon back was strong enough to ensure such the demon would die as well, only they would reform after a period of time and rampage on Earth again. So where did they reform? That means that the Biju can hop planes of existence to and from Hueco Mundo. What about the Soul Society? Hayden queried. Hey, he was technically a hollow and he was technically evil, so what did he care if the Biju were all unleashed in the Soul Society? Dump that crap in the hands of the Shinigami for all he cared. Apparently he had also forgotten Naruto's earlier point about the Biju being made into weapons by the Siriidii if they could keep the demons from outright destroying the entire population of normal souls wherever they roamed. Gaara was quick with a theory. Since the Soul Society apparently never had any reports of Biju activity among them, I would assume that there are safeguards in place to prevent simple plane hopping to the Soul Society, and they never manifested there either. Either that or the Biju are intelligent enough to stay away from there. Needless to say, if he released them in Hueco Mundo, then they could hop to the world of the living anyway. Maybe the original Rikudo Sannin was aware of the other realms and attempted to do the same thing, only he died after doing so the way Naruto would if he tried it. He probably died thinking that he had solved the Jubi problem, not knowing that he had only complicated the matter. Remember, despite what was said about him, he was just a man, not a god. Hayden stroked his chin and thought, what about hell? Nothing can get out of hell from what Yoruichi says. I don't know how to get to hell without dying first and being unrepentantly evil in the process. Naruto said with a grunt, now I don't think I'd have much of a problem with that, being stuck there myself for all eternity if I could keep Jubi Sasuke there, but here's the thing, if I die then guess what? Sasuke immediately comes out in full-on Jubi mode, free to roam the planet, more pissed than ever, and ready to rampage with nobody to stop him. Well, you could dash. Hayden started, prepared to say something else before he stopped and stroked his chin in a pondering manner. After a minute or two of failed thinking he finally growled and shouted, damn it. That's a fucking whammy. That's quite a whammy. Gaara said in agreement. I've got nothing. Hayden said, wiping his hands of the whole situation, I quit. Good luck with holding back the end of all existence with your spongy little flesh body Uzumaki. Naruto held up a single hand that tilted back and forth as he gave a deadpan expression. That's why I'm the keeper of the balance. Did you think I just thought that title up to be cute? Silence reigned over the rooftop. Okay, I did, but there was a reason for it. It wasn't just me being bored and coming up with 6 million nicknames for myself. So if you ever flat out die in battle, or if during one of your little challenges you lose to the Jubi, Air Sasuke, or whatever the Uchiha runt's name was, then we're all screwed. Hayden asked with a raised eyebrow, if he's that strong then how can you keep beating him? Because he lives in my gut and I'm used to his chakra and can use massive amounts of it while we fight to drain him, because he's Sasuke so I know his nature, because the strength of my will keeps him from releasing all of his power from the get-go, because he's sluggish and sleepy as hell every time he wakes up. I mean for Kami's sake he sleeps for most of the millennium before he decides to wake up each time. Naruto stated, listing each reason why on his fingers. Oh, and because I'm the baddest man that has ever lived. That's the most important part, Databeo. Yoruichi had to mentally laugh at such a self-inflated sense of opinion, but considering everything that had preceded it to this point she couldn't say that it was entirely unfounded in its reasoning. She wanted to confront him and talk to him about his situation. There had to be a reason he didn't want to tell her or Urahara or anyone else about it, and she wanted to trust him, but she just wanted to know. Still, it might have been because there were more pressing issues at hand. Anyway, she figured that she would trust in him. She had not been given a reason to mistrust him, but between the Bount woman Yoshino, the eternal life destined to be spent in perpetual combat with the creature of his culture's apocalypse, and the catastrophic battles for the sake of the mortal plane waged over the timeline with said creature who knew what else there was to this man? You are without a doubt the most interesting human that I have ever met, Naruto. Yoruichi thought as she walked back down the stairs to the inside of the building in her cat transformation form. I don't even think you could be called a human at this point. XXX. With Yuryu. Sundown was the time of day in Karakura town as Yuryu strode through town on his way home. It was killing him inside that he couldn't assist the others. Having spiritual awareness without the ability to actually do anything with what he could perceive around him was a hindrance. He could really understand how Tatsuki felt prior to her current training. She had been a girl that had spent her life learning to face her problems head-on and found that when it really came down to it she had been unable to handle anything the way she figured she had been able to. She was for all intents and purposes powerless no matter how much she attempted to remedy this. Until a loophole was created and she discovered a way to actually learn to deal with hollows. Unfortunately, that was not an option for Yuryu. He had locked away his ability to deal with hollows and these bounts that were apparently running amok. He felt around in his pocket for his phone, ready to try and make a call. He needed to find a way to solve this problem, and at the moment there were only two people he would possibly bring something like this to, one of whom was out of the question due to them technically being a Shinigami. And by now it was abundantly clear that unlike Urahara, Naruto wasn't a Shinigami and had unorthodox ways to solve problems and tackle situations. Some of them were stupid approaches, but they worked, and if something was stupid but it worked then it wasn't stupid. At this point Yuryu would do nearly any stupid act necessary to regain his Quincy powers. Plus he had nothing to lose by calling and asking. This was his state of mind as he hit the speed dial number and placed the phone to his ear, waiting on someone to pick up. Thinking so hard about his own lack of powers, Yuryu failed to notice that behind him the cracks in the sidewalk he had been walking on began to form strange-looking snakes that slithered along the ground behind him.